Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the LOITalk podcast. A lot has happened in the past week from an international and regional perspective. We've had an international break, obviously, but that doesn't mean the LOI has completely gone away. So we have a lot to cover in this week's episode. I'd like to introduce and thank Jamie for coming back on. Without further ado, I'll introduce the great man himself. How are we, Jamie?
Not too bad, John. I know everyone was very unfortunate that was very saddened that I wasn't here last week, but I'm back after such popular demand.
Yeah, we were having a lot of hate comments. Alright, it was tough to deal with. It was this yakker from Cork. Three yakkers from Cork actually, and they were missing the presence. Alright, so yeah, no, it's good to have you back. To be fair, the first thing we want to cover this week, Jamie, is just a brief bit on the international break with Ireland. No League of Ireland players in the squad, which was somewhat controversial, obviously. Will Ferry, for example, from Dundee United in Scotland, was included as our second left wing back option. Looks like he could be playing now against Portugal after Ryan Manning's suspension, possibly. And I found that to be quite disrespectful to Josh Honahan. I suppose it shows that Honahan was only really put in the squad as a token gesture last time to maybe give in to Stephen Bradley's demands rather than an actual ever really thinking about playing him. Now, that being said, I do rate Will Ferry very highly. It's no slight on Will Ferry, but I suppose we know how well Josh Honahan has been playing. But anyway, just to get into the matches, look, it was a really inspiring performance out in Portugal, in Lisbon. I suppose I was really impressed by. I suppose, look, we were very, almost anonymous from an attacking point of view. We didn't really create any chances. Their keeper had very little to do. Diogo Costa. However, we really limited Portugal to very little shots inside the box. They either got their goal which was from a cross, a one in a generation, amazing cross from Trincao, or else it was kind of outside the box shots. Like Ronaldo took a kind of just a Ronaldo level shot really from outside the box. You can't do much about that. He hits the post. Bernardo Silva should probably do a little bit better from close range. I think Kelleher makes a good save. That's probably their best chance of the game. So we really limited them to not much. O'Brien, Collins, and O'Shea were just so solid as a unit. And also, I think you mentioned in our last Ireland kind of breakdown that Malumbi needs to get back into the team. And I think you were absolutely proved right there. Malumbi Cullen worked really well as a pivot in kind of sterilising Portugal from the midfield and into attack. So yeah, I was very I think we were extremely unlucky. Definitely didn't deserve like a win out of it because we just didn't create the chances for that. But a really, really solid performance, and a special shout out to former League of Ireland Sligo Rovers man Seamus Coleman, who's still going at 37 and playing like one of our best players. So anyway, I want to pass over to Jamie now for his analysis on the Portugal game. But overall, I think we definitely restored a bit of pride with it. That's how I would look at it. But how did you see this game, Jamie?
Yeah, it was a strong defensive performance. Like you said, we had one shot in the game. I think it was Malumbi from outside the box, and it went nowhere near. But yeah, I think a good defensive performance. Like there wasn't those problems where we were being cut apart easily. The way we set up pushed Portugal very wide. For the most part, we should be dealing with their crosses with the size of some of our centre backs. I know that's what ultimately undid us. But that was more Josh Cullen's fault for not following Ruben Neves. Yeah, look, there's not much you can do against Portugal. You lose 1-0. You wouldn't say it's a bad result. That's not the worst case scenario. What I will say about Portugal is for the players they have, I don't think they're that good. I know they won the Nations League earlier this year, but they didn't really look that dangerous. Now, you could give that to Ireland's credit, but and I suppose they didn't have to be very good to beat us, but they didn't look brilliant. Like you look at players like Vitinha, who you could argue is the best midfielder in the world. I wouldn't say that, but you could definitely make an argument. He's definitely up there based on last season. Didn't really do anything. Like I don't think I could name a Portugal player who I thought was incredible. I couldn't name a Portugal player that I thought was great. Now it's obvious we're not focusing on Portugal. I just thought it's worth mentioning. Yeah, look, Kelleher was fantastic. But it seems like every camp the men player were always complimenting and praising is Caoimhín Kelleher, which is a good and a bad thing.
Well, that is a fair point. Yeah, that's very true. Like, we really have an incredible keeper on our hands with Kelleher. We're absolutely blessed. Two very talented keepers as well behind him. We three, I would argue, you know, with Gavin Bazunu, with Mark Travers, but but you know, but yeah, we really are blessed with Kelleher at the moment. He's in the kind of peak of his career at 26. And yeah, if Brentford go down in the Premier League this season, which could happen, I do hope he bounces back and gets another bigger move. I'm not sure if Brentford was the best decision for him, but look, that's another conversation. But no, yeah, it is probably good.
In fairness, I think at the time with Thomas Frank there, it was a good move. I think that changes with Keith Andrews there, which obviously he couldn't have saw coming. But you would say under Thomas Frank's, that's a good move.
That's a fair point, and I mean Thomas Frank did leave a few weeks after, so maybe he knew it was going to be Keith, and he was happy enough. But yeah, look, I suppose it's at the end of the day, it's a Premier League side, and he's getting regular football, so that's kind of the most important thing. But honestly, it was one of the best saves I've ever seen. Like, he essentially, like, well, I described this way better earlier in the week, but he basically, to go the wrong way and still end up saving the penalty, you know, with his legs. Like, it's one of the best penalty saves I've actually ever seen. It was like, you know, you can maybe pin the blame on Ronaldo not putting it in the corner enough or whatever, but you know, but Ronaldo at the end of the day put it middle, and Kelleher dives right, and he still finds a way to save it. I just think it's incredible. Like, it was an inspiring save, to be honest. You know, a good Cork man, Caoimhín Kelleher, and he only just continues to get better. But anyway, I want to move on to the Armenia match at the Aviva Stadium, which you were actually at, I believe. So I'll try to not hog up so much of the time this time. I want to hear your perspective more. But I do think it was a very similar first half to the away match out there in Yerevan, because we actually did start very strong, high intensity, just like we did in Yerevan. Like, if you remember, Ferguson in Yerevan comes really close to chipping the keeper and scoring a really great goal. And then, but then we just really switch off after that and let them back into the game, and then they get their goal, and then they go 2-0 up, and then we're really in trouble, you know. But again, first half was kind of like that. We started strong, passing with good intensity, but then we get frustrated. There's actually a really interesting tweet went out. They basically came and dominated possession and controlled much of the tempo. I need to read that thread. I don't know if you've read it yourself. But yeah, really, look, I think in fairness to Armenia, they've really punched above their weight in this group. They used to have, I believe, Henrik Mkhitaryan playing for them. That's probably the best player that's ever played for them in their history. Like, he was a really quality player. But at the moment, they've absolutely no standout names. You know, you'd like to think on paper, like, many League of Ireland players would make it into their team. But however, they've really stuck it up to us. They gave a good display out in Hungary as well. Maybe they let themselves down a bit against Portugal, but that happens against a team like literal world class players. So no, they can be very impressed. But look, then the second half comes. They get that silly red card. Obviously, you had a funny comment, I think, in our group chat that you know, you wanted to headbutt a few Ireland players in the past few years, so you don't blame their captain for doing it, which I found funny. But yeah, you know, I suppose I do. It's hard to say. Like, I think the performance was good in the second half, because we could have got 3-4 goals if their keeper wasn't so inspiring. However, if that red card doesn't happen, do we draw 0-0? And that's where I'll end off and pass it over to you, because it's a real concern if we don't beat Armenia at home, you know, pretty convincingly, especially with 10 men sub. So what did you make of the game?
Yeah, it was just a weird tactical game, like, altogether. Every decision, you know, you can somewhat understand starting the game as you ended it in Portugal with the same system, the same shape. But then the substitutes were weird as well. Like, what was it? Was it Festi Basele and who was Seamus Coleman that came off the first time for Parrott and Ogbene? You could argue those were our two best players. It was a strange decision. And then even Ferguson was taken off after he scored. I could very easily argue Ferguson had the chances he'd had. We win 3-0. He has a hat trick. And then you're coming out a lot more positive. But another thing I said in the group chat was Nathan Collins, who had come out a lot during his time. Was it England? The first half versus England, he had pushed out into midfield. And he looked very good until the Liam Scales red card in that game. And that was just never done again, which is weird because it worked well. And against a team like Armenia, you can push him forward, which pushes the midfield forward, and all of a sudden we're occupying the space where we didn't have this. Like there's no easy progression for this Irish team. Like Ferguson wasn't getting the ball to his feet, which is where he's at his best. Like for a big guy, he does kind of struggle aerially, but when his back to the goal, his hold up play is brilliant. Yeah, there were some players I thought were poor. Like Finn Zaz is struggled in an Irish shirt. I think he was really bad. He was really bad. Like there was at least 5 times in that match where he won the ball high up the pitch, and just played the wrong pass every time. Like Ferguson would be in front of him. He would pass the ball straight to Ferguson's feet instead of passing into the space where Ferguson could run on it, and that just slowed down the whole play. We won the game, but because Hungary drew with Portugal, we have to get a result against Portugal and beat Hungary. So it's an uphill task, to say the least.
Well, there's actually a lot to break down there. So firstly, I completely agree with you about Collins. We have actually quite an abundance of strength in centre back at this stage. I don't think people actually realise that, but you've got Scales is our basic reserve centre. Now, unfortunately, there was a family bereavement with Scales at this international break, so he wasn't able to play this particular one. But he's had a really strong start to the season for Celtic. Even his biggest haters at Celtic are starting to admit that he's playing well. Obviously O'Shea is the captain of Ipswich. O'Brien is playing really well in the Premier League consistently. So I think we do have room to possibly shift Collins into midfield,
See what I'm saying is not to permanently put him in midfield, but just to step out. Like, so when we're on the ball, he's out there, and then when we don't have it, he can sit back. So we still have that defensive solidarity. Solidarity is not the right word, but we're still defensively solid. But we have that extra body in midfield. Collins is a good passer of the ball. Like, he's probably not shown out of Ireland, but Brentford, particularly last season, he was a very good defender on the ball. And I think he gets overhated a lot. I think he cleans up a lot of Darrell O'Shea's work. I think he's definitely our best defender. I just can't understand it, because it worked well against a team like England. Why we haven't done it again against teams like Armenia?
Yeah, it didn't make a whole load of sense. I mean, especially when you see you're bringing off Coleman and Ebisela, who were quite progressive for us yesterday, and then you're keeping 3 centre-backs on the pitch against 10 men. It didn't make a whole pile of sense. The reason I would argue, maybe not for the long term, because you want to play your players and you're in their best positions, the reason I would actually argue to play Collins in midfield against Portugal, just straight in midfield, is because we are unfortunately going to be missing Jason Malumbi, which is a huge loss. Like, I think he was absolutely crucial to that game out in Lisbon. And so therefore, I don't think if we play, say, Smallbone and Cullen in midfield or something like that as a pivot, I think Portugal would have honestly destroyed us, because it just would be too open. So I can't think of another defensive midfielder that's ready at the moment. I mean, there's Bassin Lowell, who is brilliant, but I don't think he's quite ready, match sharp enough to be playing against a team like Portugal. So I think that's why for the next. Now, look, this isn't a match preview. We're just giving our opinions. I would, for the next, that crucial game at the Aviva, I think I would go for a pivot of Cullen and Collins. Now, look, I don't see Heimer, for want of a better way of saying it, having the kind of balls to do that. I do think he'll put 2 established midfielders in the pivot, but
I think it'd be Jack Taylor. I don't rate Jack Taylor that highly, but I think it would be Jack Taylor.
Jack Taylor, yes. I didn't think of Jack Taylor. Hope Jack Taylor, I think, is decent enough on his day, but that performance out in Yerevan, I think he was the worst on the pitch that day. So it scares me if he's coming up against like Neves, Matinha, all these fellas. But look, we'll stay on another positive. Like, Ryan Manning is going to miss the next Portugal game also, which is, I think, a huge as well. But on a positive note, Bruno Fernandes is out. Some would argue maybe that's actually a good thing for Portugal. But look, Fernandes is obviously a really good player. Like so. So yeah, that's. Do you have any other thoughts on the Ireland matches before we get into our bread and butter with the LOI? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to ask you your opinions on Heimer. Like, would you keep him on? Like, let's say we don't qualify, we don't get a playoff. Would you keep him on?
Look, personally, I wouldn't. I'd personally, like, for me, I always really liked him. And I still really like him as a personality. But that Armenia result was, to me, it was actually worse performance than Luxembourg. So under Stephen Kenny a few years ago. So look, I won't go too deep into it because I'll be here all night. But personally, no, I wouldn't. I would let, unless we qualify, which is possible still, I would let go of him. Yeah, but what would you do yourself?
It's like, I'm one for giving a manager time, and I probably would, purely because I don't think there's anyone else. Like, who do you go for? Like, I'm being deadly serious. If John O'Shea got that Ireland job, I wouldn't support the country ever again. Like, I would walk. I would walk. I'll go support Northern Ireland. Looks like they might get to the World Cup. Well, no, sure. Look, on the League of Ireland talk, we support Cape Verde. We'll be there covering the World Cup for Pico Lopez. Because if John O'Shea got that Ireland job, I don't know what I'd do. I'd have to retire from the beautiful game.
Yeah, no, I don't think John O'Shea is the right fit at all. I don't know. Like, I think there's options out there. Like, look, there isn't really. I mean, like, Damien Duff, is he ready? Probably isn't ready, but I think he's definitely got his name in the hat. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has been talked about. He has just been sacked from Besiktas, so is that really what you want? I don't know. I mean, like an absolute dream I don't think this is ever going to happen. But an absolute dream of mine would be Rafa Benitez. I think that would be just really just cool to see. But yeah, I don't know. I think, look, the more I think about it, maybe we do just give Heimer time. But look, if we can be competitive in these next two games, perhaps I would change my mind. But currently, I would be more siding to the word. I don't think. I'll put it this way: I was very much wanting to see the back of him after that Armenia game. I don't think respectful loss against Portugal and a 1-0 win against Armenia is enough to quite change that. But look, if we see a real shift in performances, which is possible, of course, over the next two matches, then perhaps we can reevaluate it. And we do have a better chance of qualifying for Euro 28 as well. So it would be interesting to see how he actually deals with a proper tournament. So yeah, look, we'll see what happens. I'm not going to be too devastated either way. Like, is kind of my view with it, without sitting on the fence too much. But we'll move on to our bread and butter, the League of Ireland. So for the Premier Division this week, we obviously covered Waterford's win over Drogheda United last week and Derry's win over Sligo. So we actually only have to cover two Shelbourne games. This was one on Friday the 10th of October as Shamrock Rovers lost to Tala 1-0 to their Dublin rival Shelbourne. And then my beloved Cork City were officially relegated as they bowed out with a 2-1 loss at Turner's Cross to Shelbourne. So just to cover Shamrock Rovers Shelbourne, I believe it was Carl McElroy got the goal in this narrow 1-0 win. Shamrock Rovers have a lot of games at the moment. They've been playing in Europe. They had, in Stephen Bradley's own words, their most important game of the season so far. I believe he said something to that effect anyway, against Kerry FC in the semi-final. So yeah, they've had a lot of congestion. They have won the league, you know. They've as good as won the league. So there's no need for them to be too concerned with this result. But I suppose it has delayed their title party. Shelbourne are obviously in really good form. They're now very much pushing for a European spot. They've got three wins in their last three now, beating Waterford as well in the matches before this one. So yeah, they are very much on the push for Europe. I think Joey O'Brien has really come in and steadied the ship so well. Obviously, he achieved Europe, which is just a massive achievement for them. And it looks like he's well in the race for second or third again, kind of up against Derry and Bohemians. I mean, wow, it would be incredible incredible situation if Bohemians or Derry were to miss out in Europe, but Shells really are knocking on that door. So yeah, that was Shamrock Rovers against Shelburne. And I'll just briefly cover Cork City against Shelburne, and then we'll obviously hand it over to Jamie. I'm not sure what Jarnash and David Myler and the staff were thinking by dropping Conor Brand for David Adamusa. Now, I happen to really like and rate David Adamusa. He's had a really good League of Ireland career. He's even been up the north in Cliftonville and stuff like that, and their fans absolutely loved him. So, it's nothing against Adamusa as a player. I think Adamusa, to be honest, has great potential to be a great keeper for us if he decides to stay. But I just don't understand why, when Conor Brand is in such good form, why you wouldn't want to keep him sharp. I can understand us maybe resting the likes of a Greg Bolger, who's really crucial to our final pursuit. But as for a keeper, you don't really rest keepers. You kind of play them to keep them sharp. That's kind of the way I would look at it anyway. But look, from a Shelburne perspective, it was Jack Henry Francis who got the winner in late on. Shawnee Maguire actually picked up an equalising the 79th minute, and things were looking a little bit up then. But yeah, Jack Henry Francis got his first goal of the season to seal our fate to the first division. Look, yeah, it's a good Shelburne side you're up against, obviously, but it's disappointing. But Adamusu did look, I think, a bit shaky for that first goal. Really comes out, hesitates, and Shelburne go 1-0 up. So look, I think Shelburne, the summary of these two matches is Shelburne are really grinding out results and look set to land the European place if they can keep us going after what has been a disappointing title defence. But anyway, I want to pass it over to Jamie for his opinions on these two games. So go ahead there, Jamie.
Yeah, really good couple of days for Shells. I think since Joey O'Brien's come in, I mean, I just saw this on Twitter. It might not be accurate. They've won the most points. So what was that? Late June, early July. Yeah, I mean, Rovers have got worse as the season goes on, which is typically not the way they do it. But yeah, I suppose, like you said, they have the title at one. They're in the cup final, and they're probably, the focus is on Europe and that cup final. But even then, I know you won't like me saying this, but that should be a fairly handy game. CE getting relegated. I mean, it was the inevitable. I mean, we've kind of felt it's going to happen since maybe July or maybe earlier March. Like there was a point where it might be close between Sligo and City, but no, we've kind of felt like it was almost impossible for them to stay up for a couple of months. Like I asked you, I don't know how many episodes ago it was, but I said, would you rather stay up and lose the cup or win the cup and go down? And it looks like the option you didn't want to happen might be the one that happens. Yeah, I mean, like how do you feel about the ownership like that? That's kind of what I want to know, because I think it's just blown out of proportion. Like I feel like you've been this sort of way for a while.
Yeah, look, listen, the ownership question is really complex. I mean, and to a lot of people, it's not complex at all, because to a lot of people, it's actually very black and white. Dermot Usher is the devil, and he needs to go. And look, I'm not like a regular match one fan at all. I've been very upfront and honest about that. So I don't want to disrespect, proper Cork City fans in any way, shape, or form here. I hear their concerns, and at the end of the day, the results have just not been good enough at all. So, I hear where they're coming from. What I would say is there has been a lot of investment into the club in the last 12 to 15 months. We've seen really high quality players come in. We've seen, obviously, Shawnee Maguire and Rory Keating kind of kickstarted it. But even players like Robert Feely, he's quite high profile, been playing high level in England, was really good for Bows. Fiacre Kelleher, again, has played in a really high level in England for a long time. Adamusu has established himself as a decent League of Ireland standard keeper. I'm probably forgetting more names, but the point is there's been a lot of investment gone into the club. So I suppose I agree with the fans wholeheartedly that we're not in a good enough. We're not the results in the pitch are unacceptable. You can't continue to just be too good for the first division, but not good enough for the Premier Division. That's just not sustainable for a club like Cork City. But I mean, we're seeing great talent coming through the youth academy as well. I mean, we've seen Joe Brian Whitmarsh. I think he's going to really go far, and he's doing really well over in Southampton. He broke out. Cathal O'Sullivan, just my heart goes out to him because he's been so unlucky with injuries, but we all know how good his talent is. Matthew Murray, I mean, if he can be fit against Rovers, that's where I'm getting my confidence from, because he's fantastic. And then you've got the likes of David Dunn, who got his big move to Monaco. So there is, I know this might be uncomfortable for Cork City fans to hear, but there is good things going on at Cork City FC, and there is decent ownership going on. But I suppose at the end of the day, look, fans just want to see results on the pitch. And if results on the pitch aren't happening, they're going to point the finger straight away at the people upstairs. So look, my position is I wouldn't be firmly Dermot Usher out, but that's not to try and whitewash what Dermot Usher is doing. It's kind of like, what's the alternative, I suppose, is where I'm coming at it from. If Dermot Usher goes, do things just automatically get better in the morning? And then again, maybe they do, because under Forest, which was kind of half fan owned, that was kind of 2016-17 when we were doing really well. And maybe it is no coincidence that since Usher came in, it's been poor. The truth is, my opinion on it isn't too dissimilar to like yours. Like, you think that City fans are just, well, like, I don't think this, but you seem to think that City fans are just like almost spoiled, and but like, I would love, what my point is anyway, I'd love to have someone on the pod who really is Usher out, thinks Usher is like the worst person in the world, and hear their perspective. And if you're listening and you are of that perspective, reach out to us and we'll try and start something out, because I don't, echo chambers are never healthy. But yeah, just to summarize, I suppose, I would say Usher is flawed, and I want to say as well, the ticket prices, they're way too high. He needs to put them down. But on the opposite end, there has been a lot of investment. There's good things going on at the youth academy. I don't think ownership is the only problem. Another thing is, and again, I'm going to praise our diehards. The diehard fans are unbelievable. They're the best, some of the best fans in the league. They will support till the cows come home. But we do have a bit of a problem in the county, I would say, of people just don't care enough about local soccer. And that's kind of a nationwide issue, I would say. But like Cork, there's only, I love Cove, no disrespect to Cove, but there's one big Cork club in the county, and that's Cork City. So for that logic, we should be selling out Turner's Cross every week. And I know it's hard to do that when performances are so bad, but the fact that we're not doing that is I would say a bad slight on the casuals, and that's kind of on me as well, because I get to the games enough. But it's the first step to enlightenment is encounter with the shadow, and I think we kind of do look at that and see how can we get more casuals to the games, because I don't think anyone can argue that the diehards are great. But look, sorry, Jamie, I've kind of went on a tangent there. Would you like a right to reply, or would we drive on with our drop?
Yeah, like, the one thing I'll say about the ticket prices is, like, you haven't sold a game out since 2023. Like, there's a reason that they've been put up, because you aren't getting the attendances to run a football club. I'm assuming Turner's Cross is one of the most expensive grounds in the league to actually run. It's not Cork City's, I believe. It's rented, so I'm assuming there's a fixed price that would at least assume that you're selling out maybe 50% of the stadium, which you're not even doing. And then perform, like, you were in the first division before the takeover, like, and I'm pretty sure was it 2 or 3 seasons in the first division. You got promoted, and Usher took over after you got promoted in 22, 23, that kind of period between First Division and Premier Division seasons. So like there's problems. I'm not that deep into it. Maybe if I was explained to it more, I could understand. But I just think it's a little bit of scapegoating. Like what happens if you win the cup? Like what happens then? Like who's to blame? I mean, you can't blame recruitment then because you've won the cup. And then actually all of a sudden you're able to bring loads of fans up to the Aviva. Where were they all season? You know, like fans can make a huge difference. Like they truly can to performances. Where were they? Where were they at the start of the season, the middle of the season, and now? And will they be there in the First Division next season? Unlikely.
Yeah, so I suppose it goes back to what I was kind of saying, and like interlinking with your point. What's the alternative? You know, because it's easy to bash the ticket prices, but if we're not getting the attendances, then you know you're gonna struggle to pay off the stadium and the bread and butter issues, run the club or shop or whatever you need to do. So I hear you. Yeah. I suppose on the other hand, though, maybe if ticket prices were more cheap, you'd have more people going to the games. You know, so it's kind of a double-edged sword that way. So yeah. Just before we have two more, we decided we'd add in a few Premier Division topics since there were so little Premier Division games to review this week. What we're going to do is a drop bench sell between three players I will announce in a moment, and then we're going to ask the question, should LOI games be moved to the weekends as well as Friday nights, a bit like a Premier League type structure, English type structure. So we'll start with drop bench sell. The three players are Matt Healy of Shamrock Rovers, Dawson Devoy of Bohemians, and Jack Henry Francis of Shelbourne. So I want to let Jamie go first here because I don't think I've actually heard your perspective on this. So I'm very interested to hear it. Who would you drop bench sell out of them three, Jamie?
Yeah, I think you're definitely going with Healy to start. Then you probably I would go Healy, Devoy, Jack Henry Francis, but I think that's also because Henry Francis we haven't probably seen enough of him. We obviously saw a little bit of Sligo last season and a little bit of Shells this season. I think next season will be big, and maybe my opinion will be different. But like right now, speaking here and now, I would go. If I had to pick a team for tomorrow, I would go Healy, Devoy, then Henry Francis. But like you say, I think it's so close that you could probably interchange all three of them, and you know, you wouldn't really have much to argue about. But I just think Healy's been probably the best player in the league this season, so I don't think you can be benching or selling him.
Yeah, it's a good point. Personally, and I'm not trying to be like controversial for controversial's sake, as we know I can be. I actually don't think it's that close, to be honest. I would go the exact same order as you. I'd start Healy, bench Devoy, and sell Henry Francis. Look, Henry Francis, I think, has a really high ceiling. He obviously broke out at Arsenal, was really good at Arsenal in the underage setup. That earned him places on the bench in like deep levels of the Champions League last season. He obviously has something about him, like, you know, and we all know he played really well for Sligo Rovers, played about 11 games for Sligo last year on loan, and then joined Shells this year, and it just hasn't really happened for him. He's only played 5 games. He obviously got off the mark with his first goal to relegate Cork City. But yeah, I just don't think you can really compare Henry Francis at an LOI level. Maybe he has a high ceiling than both of them, possibly, but I don't think that from an LOI perspective you can actually compare him to these two people who have been at a really high level this season and previous seasons for other clubs as well. And to the Devoy point, why would I pick Healy over Devoy? Look, Devoy has been exceptional at a League of Ireland level for many years, right? But the reason I'd edge Healy, and it is close, I probably told a lie when I said it's not close. It is. I don't think it's close between Henry Francis, but it's close between these two boys. I would say. Now, I actually did do like a bit of research for a change and looked into Devoy, how he did in England. From a statistical perspective, Devoy actually did pretty well in England. He he was consistently playing games. He got a couple of goals and assists, but obviously I haven't actually took the time to sit down and watch him, see how he's playing. So I can only assume the fact that he's back in Ireland with Bose and he's not, at a championship level or whatever, is because he didn't quite cut the mustard. As for Healy, though, he is 23. I really think Matt Healy can go across the pond and make a big impact. He was absolutely phenomenal for Cork City a few years ago. Then we sold him on to Fran Borain. Sorry, my French pronunciation is back there. I really tried my best. But we sold him on to Frank Borain in Belgium. And, he was head and shoulders probably the best in the second division in Belgium. And now he's back in Ireland at Shamrock Rovers. And, look, I love to see the League of Ireland doing well. If the best players in the world came to the League of Ireland, I would. There's no one that would be happy better than me. But from his career perspective, I was a bit weirded out that he went to Shamrock Rovers, because I think he could have went to a Belgian first division or something like that, which we love the League of Ireland, but it's a higher level. I do think, but anyway, the point is I always kind of saw Healy as more of a box-to-box midfielder when he was at City, but he's transformed this year into more of a 6. So that kind of versatility element as well. Look, I think Healy, I think he could be a fella that could be playing for Ireland in a few years' time, if he gets a championship move, or even if he gets as far as the Premier League. If Josh Cullen can do it, then I think he can as well, So, yeah, I would definitely pick Healy to start. But look, they're 3 high-quality players with 3 huge ceilings, I would say. I would probably say Devoy has maybe the lowest ceiling, and we've seen that from his club time. But anyway, Jamie, if we'll move on to the next topic, unless you want to write a reply, so go ahead.
Yeah, they're different profile players, so it is hard to compare.
That's true.
You could probably throw them all in midfield 3 and it wouldn't be unbalanced or anything, because you would probably say Devoy is kind of someone you'd want further up. Healy could be that 6, and I think Jack Henry Francis is that 8. In a midfield 3, that's easily the best in the league. So hard to compare, but we both agree. You found a way to bring down the league, but we'll move on from that.
I tried not to, but I suppose I did. Yeah, look, I need to work on that. But anyway, so the next topic from Premier Division perspective we wanted to cover was, should LOI matches be moved to weekends? I want to hear Jamie's perspective on this again. I haven't actually heard your thoughts on it yet, so I'm really looking forward to it. What do you think on this one?
Yeah, I think it's a natural progression. Look, as teams get into Europe more, it's going to be forced to happen anyways. And I think from a money-making point of view, as the league continues to grow and grow, you're going to want more TV games, and you can't be throwing 2 games on a TV on a Friday, because that splits your viewership. From a football nerd perspective, where I'll watch as much as I can, I've probably watched so much Longford Town and Sligo Rovers. I've probably watched them more than anyone, purely because they play their games on Saturdays when they're at home. So, you can, at least from my perspective, I like the idea of going to a game on a Friday, and then you can watch a game on a Saturday or a Sunday. I think the most viewed game last season, I believe, was on a Sunday. It might have been the final day on a Friday, but viewership wise, because everyone's not at a game, because if all the games are on a Friday, you're not going to get a big viewership. I think it also makes LOI TV more sellable. They promote 360 games or whatever a year, but you're not actually getting that, are you? Because most of them are live at the same time. So I think I think it's a natural progression. We're maybe not there yet, but I think 5 years time, when you probably will have a team in Europe every year, you're going to have to do it to some extent. And I think when that Virgin Media deal is up, I think to compete to win the next exclusive rights, I think you're going to have to say, yeah, we'll show 2 games a week.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm going to try and make this as least echo chambery as I possibly can. But for the record, I do agree with you. I do think it's the natural progression. I do think it's the best possible thing. But for the sake of argument, I will say I've been reading our replies we got to this, because we asked the question on Twitter. And there basically I'd say 80 to 90% of the replies we got said no, it's a bad idea. And the main argument I saw from people is that when we used to do this, Bowes Rovers at 12:30 or whatever, attendances were really low. So, and compared to that now, they've risen a lot since we moved it to Friday nights. So, maybe what you're saying is right from a armchair fan perspective. Those numbers would rise, but we might actually lose more people at the games. That's probably the main argument against it. For the record, though, I do agree with you. Just speaking for myself, it is quite tough to get to games when you're living like an hour away plus from the stadium on a Friday night, because it's it gets dark and it's tough to get parking, things like this. Whereas at least if you have a day match, I'm not saying make all games during the day because night matches really do hit different. But when you have a day match, it's kind of easier. You can drive up, you can get a bit of parking. Perhaps you can even take a bus up to Cork City in my case. It just would make the games a bit more accessible for someone like myself, living very rurally, living very far away from the stadium. So speaking for me, yeah, I would definitely like to see it happening. And also, yeah, the European point, it's a natural progression. But look, I want to make sure all views are represented. So there is obviously a strong argument against it that attendances, actual in-person attendances could go down. So yeah, while I can see both sides, I very much would be in agreement with you that it's something we should do. But yeah, hopefully it's something fans won't get too tribal and annoyed about. Hopefully people can be kind of rational and just see the merits in it. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Yeah, so with that, Jamie, do you want to chime in on any of that, or will we move on?
No, yeah, I'd agree. I think it's just very Irish just to be so against change. Like, this is the way it's been for 20 years. So, like, we're not going to do anything else. It just is the way. I don't think it should be an immediate thing. And I think first division wise, it probably shouldn't change, because I don't think you're going to be worried about first division TV broadcasting. But the way I put it is, I think it's something that should be done when the Virgin Media deal is up, as a way of getting more money for clubs through broadcasting. Just say to RT and Virgin Media, you have to show 2 games a week. Whichever one of you do gets the rights.
Yeah, look, I wholeheartedly agree. I think it actually would be very good for the league, to be honest. But anyway, we've got to move on towards our first division review. So I'll just call out the results quickly, and Jamie then, if he doesn't mind, can give a quick synopsis of them as our kind of first division correspondent. I better get used to being the first division correspondent ahead of next season. I'm still on this podcast, but currently we're at Premier Division. As long as we're in the Premier Division, I'd remain ignorant. So anyway, Friday the 10th of October, Dundalk won the league, by the way. It will officially, we know who 9 of the 10 Premier Division sides will be next year. Dundalk will be one of them. They beat Finn Harps 3-0 to win the division. Kerry FC lost 2-0 at home to Wexford FC. UCD 2, Athlone Town 2 at the UCD Bowl. Athlone Town, in fairness, starting to get a bit of form back again after a really disappointing season. Cove Ramblers, unfortunately for our good friend Ken, really disappointing result actually. 3-1 loss to Langford Town away. So Langford at the Bishopsgate beating them 3-1. And then Treaty United. Are Treaty United potentially back in the playoff race? Well, they are back in the playoff race. I suppose it's a question of will they, actually win it or not. Treaty United 2, Bray Wanderers FC 1. Really, yeah, look, we have a lot of Treaty United people that are on our team, and they were absolutely thrilled with this win, of course. They've had a rough second half of the season. They had that period of, I think, was it 1 or 2 or even no wins in 19. Barrett's position, who was a friend of the podcast, I think a great manager, but his position was obviously under threat for a while there. I think that's fair to say. So yeah. Oh, and sorry, I missed just one game there also. Finn Harps 1, Kerry FC 1. That was Monday the 13th of October, just Monday gone there. So yeah, some really interesting results in there though. excuse me. I suppose the big question to me is the playoff race is really heating up, and are Treaty United back in that now? I think they very much are. After a strong start to the season, they struggled for a while, but they seem to be back in it now. But I will pass it over to our contemporary First Division correspondent. Go ahead there, Jamie.
Yeah, I suppose Cove just knew the title race was done. I don't think they expected Finn Harps to get anything against Dundalk. Finn Harps they had a little bit of good form for a couple of weeks, but ever since they lost in the Cup to Cork City, that's kind of gone out the window. Dundalk are champions, as you would expect, probably closer than people expected, but it kind of ruins the whole thing we were building up for weeks, like Cove versus Dundalk on the final day. Now that's going to be worth nothing, but Kerry losing to Wexford, what you would expect. Kerry have nothing to play for. UCD Athlone, two UCD's playoff spot is secured. Athlone finished bottom of the league. Treaty versus Bray. So Treaty remain in fifth place, so they have to play Wexford on Friday. That will determine the playoff spot. If Treaty can hold on and get a point or win, they will get that fifth place playoff spot. But if they lose, Wexford take it away. And then Kerry versus Finn Harps. Again, both teams had nothing to play for. It was like you could tell the way Kerry were bringing players on. Like they were bringing players on I would have grown up playing against, which says everything you need to know. There's only one important fixture this upcoming week. Otherwise, the rest of the First Division is already decided. Maybe bar positioning, but that's really irrelevant.
Yeah, I think people are just looking forward for the playoffs to kick off now. And we'll hopefully have an interesting set of playoffs. We'll go into the Premier Division preview now, but you have kind of Galway are very much down there in trouble. Sligo Rovers are in a little bit of trouble, but they should be safe. And Waterford is the other team. So we don't know who that other Premier Division side is going to be yet. So at least we have a bit of a race there. But the positioning is the outcome of the table in the First Division is pretty much over. Just to get onto the Premier Division preview, so I'm just going to list out the games. We have Drogheda United against Cork City, Galway United against Bohemians, Shelbourne against Sligo Rovers, St. Pat's against Shamrock Rovers, Waterford against Derry City, and then the following Monday, a Dublin derby clash between Bohemians and St. Patrick's Athletic to fill in those two teams game in hand. Just by matter of order, we'll start with Drogheda against Cork City. Drogheda still have a little bit to play for. I think they're within a few points of Europe. But they are, I would say, in the back seat when it comes to Europe. Not in the driving seat. They are probably struggling a little bit there in that regard. But they still have more to play for than Cork City. Cork City at this stage, I think it's a good point someone made that we are essentially in pre-season for the cup final. So these games do matter, but not from a points in the board perspective. All I ask from Ger Nash is that he maybe rests Greg Balger and maybe even Sean Maguire, but that he plays Conor Brand unless there's some sort of an injury issue there. Keep him sharp because he is going to be a big part of that FAI Cup final if we do if we are to get any success there. So Jamie, Drogheda United up against Cork City. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, like you said, Drogs are going to have to finish the season well if they want Europe. But they have a pretty handy enough run, you would say. They have City this week. Then they have Galway next week away. And I believe they finished the season against Bohemians. I don't know if that's home or away. 9 points from there, and you would say they probably get Europe because Bows would be one of their direct rivals. It's just all about how they finished the season. They would have been very disappointed, obviously, to have not played in Europe this year because of the ownership rules. I mean, it was their own mistake, but avoiding that subject, they'll want to amend those things to I suppose, apologise to the fans. And I think the only way they do it, I think they do have to get 9 from 9 if they are to do that, and I would assume they'd be Cork City at home. you're not expecting much. It would probably be very frustrating if Cork City managed to win this game, because it's the definition of too little, too late.
Yeah, absolutely. Just just to be honest, minutes in the legs, I think, is all that Cork City are playing for at this stage in the league. This is the game you might be at. Galway United Bohemians at DC Park. So yeah, look, Galway are still literally fighting for their lives. I think they are the team that are, of the three that I mentioned there, that are probably most likely to find themselves in ninth spot. But they still are going to want to avoid that at all costs. So can they, bring a dagger to Bohemians? I should probably mention, even though it wasn't a competitive game, Schalke from Germany came to Stadium Park to play Bose. Bose actually won 3-2. Obviously, Schalke are kind of struggling at the moment in Germany. A huge club, but they would probably have had a lot of their players out in international duty. But still good for Bose to beat a German side. That's quite impressive. So that was kind of Bo's experience of the international break. So look, they're in good form. Galway United seem quite demoralised, as we've established many times in the podcast, since that sale of Moses Dyer, really struggling to score goals. So yeah, I see Bo's maybe winning this one 2-0, and Galway kind of continue to deteriorate and potentially finish ninth. But Jamie, how do you see this one go?
Yeah, go with a game of hand on both Sligo and Waterford, so that could be big. They're 3 points behind both. Waterford have the worst of the goal difference, so a win could put them in 8th and put Waterford 9th. They play Waterford on the final day, which could be a very exciting game. Last season had the title race excitement, but I think that this season has a lot of excitement on the final day, Europe and relegation playoff wise. Yeah, big game on both ends of the table. I actually I could see a 0-0 draw, which is a bad for the eye, but good result for Galway. Both will be frustrated, but yeah, I can see all three teams in those relegation playoff positions just hitting form towards the end of the season, just making it exciting. It's just a very League of Ireland thing to do. All the European teams start dropping points. All the teams that are near the bottom of the table start picking them up. I think Galway gets something from this game. I would edge towards a draw, but I wouldn't be surprised if they win it.
Look, Galway are going to be absolutely fighting for their lives. I suppose we've got to watch themselves for this game. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Obviously, we were talking about Dawson Devoy earlier. He will have a big role to play up against the likes of Jimmy Keohane. Next game we have is Shelbourne Rovers. I'm tired, lads. Sorry. Shelbourne against Sligo Rovers at Talca Park. So yeah, Shelbourne, really unreal form at the moment. And Sligo are actually recently lost to Derry, quite unluckily, narrowly. But we all know how good Sligo have been this year. A really tough start, but they've come back well, as they do many seasons, to be fair. Slow starts, but do well in the end. Yeah, look, I think Shells haven't been convincingly beating teams. It's been 1-0, 2-1, scrappy wins, late goals. But I do think they continue the trend here and edge it 1-0 against Sligo Rovers, which will make things really interesting. It's 3 tough games this week for all 3 relegation threatened sides. We'll get on to Waterford, Derry in a minute. But yeah, the point is it's 3 really tough games for all sides, because they're literally up against the 3 sides going for Europe, so it doesn't get much tougher than that, other than if you're playing Shamrock Rovers. But yeah, I do see Shells. Hopefully for Jack Henry Francis, he can continue his kind of good form and kind of establish himself as a decent LOI player now. So yeah, I'm going to say 1-0. 1-0 Shells. How do you see this one go?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind this game being the one on TV. Obviously, Rovers could win the league, so that's the reason that game's being broadcasted. But these are the 2 second half of the season form teams. I think it'll be a good watch. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Like, I mean, anyone that listens to the podcast regularly will know. For some reason, there's just something about Sligo that makes me always back them. Shells have obviously picked up points, 6 points from 6 in the last week, and are looking good in that European position. I'm gonna go 2-2 draw. I feel like it'll be exciting. I'm gonna go draw. I'm gonna back Sligo. I don't know why, but they just have some hold over me.
Yeah, look, I suppose Shells are in really good form, so that it has to end at some point. And Sligo have shown their quality all season. So yeah. Next game we have is St. Pat's up against Shamrock Rovers at Richmond Park. Look, Pat's a really disappointing season. I think all their fans will happily admit that. Well, not happily, but they'll admit it. Yeah, they've just really been underwhelming. I think they were a lot of people's favourites for a title, but it just hasn't materialised at all. And they, it would have been a nice kind of consolation to have even got to a cup final a day out in the Aviva, and they couldn't even manage that. So yeah, Rovers, if they win, they win the league, right? Am I right in saying?
Yeah, a point, or if they drop points.
My bad. Okay, so yeah, I think Rovers get it over the line. They have been struggling a bit recently, even in Europe and so on and so forth. But I think they get the 1-1 draw and win the league. Look, Rovers have been fantastic all season. They kind of just seem to be real level above everyone else in the way they're operating, in terms of academy structures, in terms of transfers, scouting. They seem to be really getting it right. But obviously Stephen Bradley is a huge part of that. If Stephen Bradley goes, it will be, I think the league could become a lot more open then. But saying that, people are kind of acting like Rovers are this big club. They're a million miles ahead of everyone else. But I don't remember anyone seeing this coming, them running away with the league so much. I don't think I remember anyone predicting them to win the league. So that could be an interesting talking point for yourself if you want. But yeah, how do you see this game going?
Yeah, I see Rovers winning. There's just a lot of feeling good about the club at the minute. Even if they lost to Shells last week, they'll be welcoming back Pico Lopez in a cup final. Chance to do the double for the first time in my lifetime. I have no memory of them doing it, but obviously I don't know what happened pre my existence. I don't know what kind of point I'm trying to make. But Bradley's spoken a lot about wanting to do it, and he could potentially do it along with Europe. It's a good time to be a Shamrock Rovers fan. Pats, I suppose, sort of the opposite. They talked they talked a big talk, and they couldn't walk the walk this season. Yeah, and you can't get rid of Stephen Kenny because he's on like a 5-year contract. And I heard on a podcast, and I don't know if it's accurate, but he's earning reportedly $200,000 a year. So you don't really want to be getting rid of him, do you?
Okay.
Yeah, you would expect them to come good next season. Even if they lose Melia, you would guess they spend that money wisely. Aidan Keena has been disappointing for me this season. I know he had a bit of injury problem. He started the season well. I think he had 6 goals in like the first 7 games, and I don't think he scored since. It's just not been a great season for Pats. I don't really know what else to say. On Bradley, I don't see him ever leaving, to be honest. Like, what could really take him away? Like, I think it's only the Ireland job, really, or like a really big job that you can't say no to. Like, I don't think he's going to the championship to leave Shamrock Rovers. I think it would have to be a very big job.
Yeah, I mean, if he stays and does really well in Europe, wins a couple more doubles, he does solidify himself as the best LOI manager of all time. I think like second to none, because seeing Stephen Kenny now come back to the league after taking the Ireland job. I guess the Ireland job is a bit of a poison chalice, like many international roles, because Stephen Kenny just does not seem the same as he was before. And he's kind of widely regarded as the best of our lifetime anyway, of what us kind of younger people can remember. So yeah, I'll just add as well, Rovers have, I believe, 25 FAI Cups in their history. But in recent times, you're right, they have struggled to win it. So yeah, look, I think that's where most people's attentions are, is that final. It's Cork against Dublin. It's huge. So, but the last game of that match weekend, we just have one more game to preview then in the Premier Division with Waterford against Derry City. So again, another European versus relegation clash. Two teams fighting for survival in their own ways. Derry City are in pretty good form as they travel down to Waterford. They beat Sligo Rovers, who are, I would argue, a much better side than Waterford in their last game. They've got Duffy on the wing, who's absolutely on fire. Like, look, I've been a big believer in the Tiernan Lynch project. I think I think he will come good with them. I think if there can just be that bit more investment next year and maybe younger players, middle-aged players, then they can really kick on next season and maybe be the team to challenge Rovers. As for Waterford, look, they are in a bit of trouble. I believe it was actually Derry they lost 7-1 to earlier in the season. That's probably why their goal difference is so behind their two rivals. Look, it's going to be a close one. Waterford away is never an easy one. Munster teams always make it tough if you travel down to them, that kind of a way. So yeah, all in all, I see Derry edging this one 2-1. I think I have predicted all of the relegation sides to lose. So there will be no impact on any of them really. It'll all just be kind of mutually assured destruction for all three. I see. Yeah, so that's kind of it. And so that means also the European sides will just be gaining 3 points on each other, so it won't be that much of a difference there either, I suppose. So Jamie, I'll move on to you there. How do you see this one going? And then we'll close off with Bohemian St. Pat's.
Yeah, Waterford just bad defensively. The Cork City, they're probably the worst defensive team, and you can maybe make an argument. They're worse than Cork City defensively. They just have the best goal scorer in the league, that is Paul Drugamond. I see Derry battering them 3-4-0. They're the team I'm kind of leaning towards going down, which would be bad for Munster football. Seeing both teams go down. Cole could go up still, but yeah, I don't know. I Conan Noonan and Paul Drugamond have been the only two Waterford players I've watched this season. And thought, they're Premier Division players. There hasn't been a lot of other ones. Obviously, Andy Boyle's had a good career, but maybe not up to the standard anymore. I don't know. I see Sligo staying up. I would 100% say Sligo will stay up. I can't say the same about Waterford or Galway. I look at them right now and I think Waterford are the worst of the three, and I see them going down.
Would you say Mac Mullen is Premier Division level player, getting call-ups with Northern Ireland and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard. McMullen's the goalkeeper, yeah.
He's the goalkeeper for them, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's always hard to judge a goalkeeper for a bad defensive team because they can look unreal just because they're making a lot of saves.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I would have to see him with another team. I wouldn't. He's been good and bad. He's had bad games as well. It's hard to judge again because the players in front of him aren't great. So it's is he conceding so many goals because he's a bad goalkeeper, or is he conceding so many goals just because it's a bad defense? I don't know. He's not been standout to me. I would say Conan Noonan has been the player that we've known Hammond's a very good player for years, but Conan Noonan is the player that's really stood out for me for Waterford this season that I probably wouldn't been as excited to watch as I am now. But yeah, I don't know why I'm going so hard on Waterford right now, but I see them going down. I see them losing this game 3-4-0. And like I said, bad. Well, I would assume Cove win the playoffs, so a Munster team kind of has to stay in, but you're going from 2 to 1,
which is a positive. Yeah. Look, I mean, I don't think you're too far wrong. I mean, a 3-4-0 loss would be really damaging towards their hopes to stay up. We'll see how it goes. The final Premier Division game we have to cover, we get to cover, I should say, not have to cover, is Monday. Monday night, Bohemians, St. Patrick's Athletic. Probably both have more to play for here. St. Patrick's still somewhat in the race for Europe. If they can win this, they definitely put their name back in the hat. But Bows are more in the driving seat, I would argue. Look, I don't want to get into a big preview again. We've discussed both teams. I'm just going to say Bows win this 2-0. How do you see this one going?
I agree with you. I suppose we've kind of just gone over both teams as well, like you say. I know I said Bows will drop points to Galway, but I think Bows will drop points to Galway and they'll respond at home in a big game versus Pats. I fancy them for Europe at this stage. I'll go the exact same score as you. I'll follow you away.
We're agreeing a lot tonight.
The first time.
Yeah, it probably is a change. We don't really usually, so which is healthy. I mean, it's healthy not to agree as well. But
I'm looking forward to the cup final episode. That'll be fun.
I can't wait. Well, yeah, it's going to be unreal. We'll be in Kilkenny, which is not a big dose, but anyway, we won't get into that on here. Just briefly cover the first division. Just to cover the games, and I'll give a quick prediction. Athlone Town up against Langford Town, the battle of the towns. Bray Wanderers, Kerry FC, Cove Ramblers, Dundalk. This is actually the final game of the first division. Okay, I didn't even realise that. Finn Harps, UCD, and Wexford Treaty United. So look, there's nothing to really play for the most part, other than playoffs. So yeah, Athlone, Langford. I think Langford is still kind of in the race. Athlone are well off it. I see Langford edging this one 1-0. Bray Wanderers, Kerry FC. I've always, there's a bit of an unspoken bond between Cork and Kerry, but I think that will definitely, as you progress over the years, that would definitely get worse. But I suppose what I'm, you probably don't agree. That's probably the first time we've really clashed here. But I mean, I would argue that maybe you're not one of these, to be fair, but many Kerry FC fans are former Cork City fans. I think that's a fact. So that's kind of where there's a bit of an unspoken bond. But that will definitely change as we get worse or as you get better. Hopefully we both get better, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. Cove Ramblers Dundalk. This had potential to be a really big one, but unfortunately it means nothing now. I think Cove overall were qualified for the playoffs, so even if they lose, it's not too damaging. I'm just going to say Cove win this 2-0. Finn Harps, UCD. Finn Harps, in much worse form than UCD. UCD are, I believe, up there for the playoffs. They could be a team to watch, to be honest. They're a dark horse. They do have form for going up to the Premier Division. So I'm going to say UCD win this one 1-0. Then a big one for Treaty United. Wexford FC, who have been kind of in and out of form again. Treaty United, it's a big ask for Treaty to go away. I'm going to say 0-0 draw. Jamie, you'll be able to offer much more insight than me here as we close out. So how do you see this game week going?
Yeah, absolutely. None of these games matter, really. Dundalk have won the league. I think Bray are third, that's confirmed. Cove are second, that's confirmed. UCD are fourth, that's confirmed. And then you have Wexford versus Treaty, fifth and sixth. That is the only game that matters. If Kerry win by a certain amount of goals and Finn Harps lose by a certain amount of goals, Kerry would finish eighth instead of ninth. But that's irrelevant. Treaty Wexford. Oh, I would love it. I would love it if Wexford win just for the Treaty head loss. They're probably one of the biggest moaners you'd see on Twitter. But I suppose that's because we're associated with a lot of Treaty fans. Oh, I'd love it. I would love it. I'm gonna say Wexford win. I don't even need to predict any of the other games because they don't matter. But I'm gonna say Wexford win just for the head loss.
That's probably the most important one, yeah. So it'd be really interesting to see how how Treaty get on. Look, I want to see Munster clubs up there. Well, I suppose maybe not actually now that we're in the first division. I want to see them all down there with us so we can have loads of Munster derbies. Yeah, that's kind of it. That kind of brings us to the end of the podcast, lads. Thank you all so much for listening. People might have seen we had a post. We had a post about we've recruited some new people, which is so exciting. That's going to have an impact on the podcast as well as articles, writing, everything really to do with the company or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Reach out to us, leave your opinions in the comments below, and we'll end it off there. Thanks a million, folks.